My name is Penelope Adler, 28 years old, and my sense of security nearly collapsed when my own father sold my luxury apartment behind my back. I still remember the smug look on his face when he handed me that insulting $900 gift card as compensation for the $2 million he pocketed from the sale. After promising to help manage the property while I was overseas for work, my father, Richard Adler, secretly negotiated with a developer and forged my signature on the sale documents. That resulted in me nearly losing everything I'd worked for since college. My father thought I would accept this quietly like I always had, but this time he went too far. The consequences went far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Before I continue my story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Leave a like and subscribe for more family secrets nobody talks about. The apartment had been my sanctuary for 3 years. Located in the heart of downtown Boston, it was the first major purchase I made after my tech startup was acquired. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, and I had lovingly decorated each room to reflect different chapters of my life. The living room, with its cream-colored sofas and minimalist design, was where I entertained colleagues. My home office, lined with books and a vintage desk I'd restored myself, was where I drafted plans for my next venture. But the balcony was my favorite spot, where I drank my morning coffee, contemplated my future, and found peace above the bustling city. I had purchased the apartment with my own money, every penny earned through late nights, strategic risks, and unwavering determination. For a woman who grew up watching her father gamble away our family's financial security multiple times, owning this property represented more than luxury. It was proof that I had broken the cycle of instability. My relationship with my father had always been complicated. Richard Adler was charming, persuasive, and fundamentally selfish. Throughout my childhood, I watched him convince my mother that his latest investment scheme would be the one to deliver the life we deserved. Each failure was followed by tearful promises of change, which my mother accepted until their divorce when I was 16. Despite everything, I maintained a cautious relationship with him. When I announced my 3-month assignment in Berlin, he offered to check on my apartment periodically. "I'm proud of you, Penny," he said, using the nickname from my childhood. "This is a big opportunity. Don't worry about anything here. I'll make sure everything's taken care of." I hesitated, but ultimately agreed. At 28, I wanted to believe he had changed. I created a limited power of attorney document allowing him to handle minor maintenance issues and collect mail. Nothing more. I signed it, had it notarized, and gave him a copy. What I didn't tell him was that I had installed a security system with cameras I could monitor remotely and had a lawyer friend prepared to intervene if necessary. The first month in Berlin was exhilarating. Leading a team developing privacy software kept me busy, but I still checked the security feed occasionally. Everything seemed normal. My father visited once a week, collected packages, watered my plants. In the second month, things changed. His visits became more frequent, and he began bringing people to my apartment, well-dressed men with portfolios who walked from room to room, gesturing and nodding. I called him immediately. "Dad, who were those people in my apartment today?" "Just some friends admiring your place, sweetheart. You've done so well for yourself. I was proud to show it off." His explanation didn't sit right, but I was in the middle of a critical project phase and couldn't afford to fly back. Instead, I called my lawyer friend, Diane. "Something's not right," I told her. "Could you drive by and check on things? Maybe review the property records to make sure nothing's changed?" 2 days later, Diane called back. Her voice was tight. "Penelope, there's been a sale inquiry filed for your property. Someone's attempting to list it." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I never authorized a sale." "The paperwork has your signature on it," she said. "But if you didn't sign it, it's forged," I finished for her. "My father." We acted quickly. Diane filed legal objections to the sale and sent formal notices to real estate agencies warning them about the fraudulent listing. I contacted my bank to flag any unusual transfer attempts related to my property. Then I booked the next flight home. When I landed in Boston, I had 17 missed calls from my father. I ignored them all and took a taxi straight to my apartment. The security code still worked, and I let myself in, half expecting to find the place emptied. Everything looked the same, but it felt different, violated. I walked through each room, running my fingers along the surfaces, reassuring myself that this was still mine. When I reached the kitchen, I noticed a business card on the counter. Thomas Blackwell, Pinnacle Development Group. I hadn't even had time to unpack when my father showed up at my door, his face a mix of surprise and alarm. "Penny, you're back early. Why didn't you tell me?" "Come inside, Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." The expression on my father's face shifted from surprise to calculation as he stepped into my apartment. I recognized that look. I'd seen it countless times growing up. It was the face he made when figuring out how to spin a situation to his advantage. "You look tired, honey," he said, moving toward the kitchen. "Let me make you some tea. How was Berlin? Did you close the deal?" I blocked his path. "Stop. No small talk. Tell me about Thomas Blackwell and why you brought him to my apartment." My father's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Tom? He's an old friend. Real estate investor. Smart guy. I thought he might have some insights on property values in this area. You know, for when you eventually want to upgrade. And the other men? The ones with clipboards and measuring tapes?" He waved dismissively. "Just some colleagues of his. They're always looking for comparable properties to assess market trends." "Dad?" I said, my voice tight. "I saw the paperwork. I know you tried to sell my apartment." The silence that followed was heavy. My father's smile finally dropped, and he sank onto my sofa, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. "It wasn't like that," he began, his tone shifting to the one he used when explaining away mistakes. "It was an opportunity, Penny. A developer wants this entire floor. They're offering above market value. I was negotiating for you. Without my knowledge or consent? I was going to surprise you with the profit." He leaned forward. "Do you know what they were willing to pay? $2 million, Penny. For this one apartment. I was doing you a favor." The audacity almost made me laugh. A favor would be respecting my property and my decisions. A favor would be honoring the limited power of attorney I gave you, which absolutely did not include selling my home. His expression darkened. "You never could see the big picture. $2 million! Do you know what you could do with that kind of money?" "That's not the point, Dad. This is my home. I didn't want to sell it." "Home is just a concept," he said dismissively. "Smart investors know when to cash out. I thought I taught you better than this emotional attachment to material things." The irony of his statement was staggering. The man who had chased get-rich-quick schemes my entire childhood was lecturing me about smart investing. "You taught me plenty," I said coldly. "Like how to recognize when I'm being manipulated." His face flushed. "You don't understand my position. I have some temporary financial concerns. The commission from this sale would have helped me through a rough patch." And there it was, the real motivation. Not concern for my financial future, but his own desperate need for cash. Some things never changed. "How much?" I asked. "How much were you going to take from this favor you were doing me?" He looked away. "We agreed on a 5% finder's fee. $100,000, I calculated quickly. You were going to take $100,000 of my money, which would have left you with $1.9 million, he countered. "Don't act like I was stealing from you. This was a business arrangement." "A business arrangement requires consent from all parties," I replied. "Did you forge my signature on the sales documents?" He stood up abruptly. "This conversation is pointless. You've always been stubborn, just like your mother. I was trying to help you. If you can't see that, then I don't know what else to say." I felt a familiar ache in my chest, the pain of hoping for better from someone who consistently disappointed me. But this time, it was accompanied by something new. Resolve. "The sale's been stopped," I told him. "I've filed legal objections and notified all parties involved about the fraud." "Fraud?" His voice rose. "That's ridiculous. It was a misunderstanding, not fraud. You're overreacting." "Am I?" Because Diane tells me forging signatures on property documents is a felony offense. The color drained from his face. You involved a lawyer? Penny, this is family. We handle family matters privately. This stopped being a family matter when you tried to sell my apartment without my consent. He paced the room, running his hands through his silver hair. Look, I admit I got ahead of myself. I should have discussed it with you first. But this offer won't last forever. The developers are ready to move forward immediately. We can still make this work. There is no we in this situation, I said firmly. And there will be no sale. He stared at me for a long moment, then reached into his jacket pocket. Fine. If you're determined to be difficult about this, at least let me make it up to you. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a gift card to a high-end department store. The amount, $900. I stared at it in disbelief. What is this? A peace offering, he said. I know you like shopping there. I thought you could buy yourself something nice. The disconnect was so profound I couldn't immediately process it. My father had attempted to sell my $2 million apartment without my permission, planned to pocket $100,000 for himself, and now was offering me a $900 gift card as compensation. Are you serious? I finally managed. What? It's a generous amount, he said defensively. I handed the gift card back to him. I think you should leave now. Penny. Now, Dad. And don't come back unless you're ready to take responsibility for what you've done. He hesitated, then shoved the gift card into his pocket. You're making a mistake. That offer won't be on the table forever. Neither will our relationship if you keep this up, I warned. After he left, I sat alone in my living room, watching the city lights come alive as evening fell. The apartment felt different now, tainted by his betrayal, but also more precious to me. This space represented not just my financial independence, but my emotional boundaries as well. I picked up my phone and called Diane. I need to change all my locks and security codes, I told her. And I want to file a restraining order against my father. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of text messages from my father, ranging from apologetic to accusatory. The final one read, "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. The buyers are getting impatient. We can split the money 80-20 if that makes you happy." I blocked his number and made myself coffee. As I stood on my balcony watching the morning commuters below, I realized I needed to understand exactly what had transpired during my absence. I called Thomas Blackwell, the developer whose card I'd found in my kitchen. "Mr. Blackwell, this is Penelope Adler. I believe you've been in discussions with my father about purchasing my apartment." There was a pause on the line. "Yes, Ms. Adler. Though I was under the impression that you were fully aware of these negotiations. Your father represented himself as your authorized agent." "He was not," I stated firmly, "and I need to understand exactly what agreements were made." Blackwell sounded genuinely surprised. "We've signed preliminary contracts contingent on final approval. Your father assured us you were traveling but had given him full authority to complete the sale. May I ask what documentation he provided to support this claim?" "He showed us a power of attorney document," Blackwell said. "Our legal team reviewed it and found it satisfactory." My stomach tightened. "Did you keep a copy of this document?" "Of course. Would you like me to email it to you?" 10 minutes later, I was staring at a sophisticated forgery. The limited power of attorney I had given my father had been altered to grant him full authority over my property, including the right to sell. The signature at the bottom looked remarkably like mine, but with subtle differences only I would notice. I forwarded the document to Diane with a message. "Evidence of forgery. What are my options?" While waiting for her response, I called the security company that monitored my apartment. They confirmed what I suspected. My father had disabled the cameras during several of his visits, citing privacy concerns when bringing potential buyers through the property. Diane called back within the hour. "This is serious, Penelope. The good news is we caught it before the sale was completed. The bad news is your father committed several crimes here. Forgery, attempted fraud, possibly identity theft. What should I do?" "Legally, you have grounds to press charges," she explained. "But I understand this is your father. At minimum, we need to formally notify all parties involved that the power of attorney was forged. The sale is invalid, and any further attempts to proceed will result in legal action. Do it, I said, feeling a mix of resolve and sadness. And I want to revoke any legal authority he might claim to have over any of my affairs. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen counter, trying to process the magnitude of my father's betrayal. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned mistake. It was a calculated attempt to profit at my expense, the latest in a lifetime of selfish actions, but by far the most egregious. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw an elegant older woman with silver-streaked dark hair. My mother, Elizabeth. I opened the door, surprised. "Mom? What are you doing here?" She embraced me tightly. "Diane called me. She thought you might need support." My mother and I had grown closer after the divorce, bonded by our shared experience of my father's manipulations. She had rebuilt her life in the aftermath, starting a successful interior design business and remarrying a kind, stable man who treated her with respect. "Did she tell you what he did?" I asked as I led her inside. "Enough," my mother said grimly, though I can't say I'm entirely surprised. We settled in the living room, and I filled her in on the details. As I spoke, her expression shifted from anger to deep concern. "Penelope, there's something you should know," she said when I finished. "Your father contacted James 2 weeks ago asking for a loan, a substantial one. James was my stepfather, a financial advisor with a thriving practice. Did he say why?" She nodded. "Gambling debts. Apparently, he's in deep with some unpleasant people. When James refused the loan, your father became desperate, said he had a big deal coming through that would solve everything." The pieces clicked into place. My father's urgency wasn't just about opportunity, it was about necessity. He needed that commission to pay off debts. "How bad is it?" I asked. James did some discreet checking, at least $300,000 in debts to private lenders, not the kind who accept late payments. I felt a chill. "So when I stopped the sale, you also stopped his way out of a dangerous situation," my mother finished, "which makes him even more desperate now." As if on cue, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Penelope? It's Thomas Blackwell again. I'm calling because your father is in my office right now, insisting that there's been a misunderstanding. He's claiming you changed your mind about the sale and are trying to renegotiate for a higher price." I closed my eyes, processing this new deception. "Mr. Blackwell, there is no misunderstanding. I never agreed to sell my apartment. The power of attorney document you were shown was forged. You should be receiving formal notification from my lawyer shortly." "I see," Blackwell said slowly. "That's concerning. Your father is quite insistent. Put him on the phone, please." There was a shuffling sound, then my father's voice, tight with anger. "What do you think you're doing, Penny? This deal needs to happen." "Not going to happen, Dad. It's over. Stop lying to Mr. Blackwell and everyone else involved." "You don't understand what's at stake," he hissed. "I need this to go through." "Your gambling debts aren't my problem," I said. "And stealing from me isn't the solution." There was a shocked silence. "How did you—" "Mom told me everything. If you're in trouble, there are legitimate ways to handle it. This isn't one of them. Your mother had no right. She had every right to warn me." I cut him off. "Now, you have two choices. Walk away from this gracefully, or I press charges for forgery and fraud. Your decision." After a long pause, he said, "This isn't over," and hung up. My mother reached for my hand. "Are you all right?" I wasn't. Not really, but I nodded anyway. "I need to make sure he can't try this again, with this property or anything else in my name. We'll help you," she promised. "James has excellent security contacts, and I can stay with you for a few days if you'd like." For the first time since discovering my father's betrayal, I felt tears threatening, not from sadness, but from relief at having support. Real support, not the manipulative kind my father had always offered. "Thanks, Mom. I'd like that." As we sat together planning next steps, I realized something important. The apartment had taken on a new significance. It was no longer just a symbol of my financial independence. Now, it represented my refusal to be manipulated, my courage to set boundaries, and my ability to protect what was mine. The following day brought a chilly autumn rain that matched my mood. I'd spent a restless night jumping at every sound, half expecting my father to show up unannounced. My mother had taken the guest room, her presence a comfort I hadn't realized I needed so badly. Over breakfast, she studied me with concern. "You look exhausted, sweetheart." "I keep thinking about all the times I gave him another chance," I admitted, stirring my coffee absently. "All the red flags I ignored." "We see what we want to see in people we love," she said gently. "I did the same thing for 20 years. But you eventually left. What was your breaking point?" She considered this, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "It wasn't one moment. It was the realization that he would never change because he didn't think he needed to. Your father believes his own lies, Penelope. That's what makes him so convincing and so dangerous." The doorbell interrupted our conversation. Through the security monitor, I saw a courier in the lobby. After verifying his ID, I accepted delivery of a large envelope from Diane's law firm. Inside was a comprehensive legal packet, documents officially revoking any power of attorney granted to Richard Adler, cease and desist notices regarding my property, and paperwork for a temporary restraining order. "Is this really necessary?" I asked my mother, holding up the restraining order application. She didn't hesitate. "Yes, he's cornered and desperate. That's when he's most unpredictable." I signed the documents with a heavy heart. By noon, Diane had filed everything, and the temporary restraining order was in effect. My father could no longer legally come within 100 feet of me or my property. Around 2 o'clock, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "This is your father. Since you've blocked my number, I'm using a friend's phone. We need to talk like adults. Meet me at Westfields at 7 p.m. Westfields was an upscale restaurant downtown where my father often entertained clients. I showed the message to my mother. "He's trying to control the situation by choosing neutral territory," she observed. "Somewhere public where you can't make a scene. Should I go?" She hesitated. "That depends. Do you think there's anything he could say that would change your mind about the apartment?" "No," I said firmly. "Then what's the point? He's not looking for reconciliation, Penelope. He wants another chance to manipulate you." I knew she was right, but part of me, the daughter who had spent a lifetime seeking her father's approval, wanted to believe he might finally take responsibility for his actions. "I'll think about it," I told her, though I had already decided. That evening, at 6:45 p.m., I asked my building's security guard to escort me to my car. As we crossed the parking garage, I spotted my father leaning against a column near the exit, smoking a cigarette, a habit he'd supposedly quit years ago. "That's him," I whispered to the guard. "The man I have the restraining order against." The guard, a former police officer named Ray, stepped between us as my father approached. "Penny, we need to talk," my father called out, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under his shoe. "Sir, I need you to stop right there," Ray said authoritatively. "Ms. Adler has a restraining order against you. You need to leave the premises immediately." My father's face darkened. "A restraining order? Against your own father?" He addressed me over Ray's shoulder. "This is ridiculous, Penny. I raised you better than this." "You're violating a legal order, sir," Ray continued. "I'm going to have to call the police if you don't leave now." "Go ahead," my father challenged, his voice rising. "Let my daughter explain to the police why she's treating her father like a criminal." I stepped forward, finding my voice. "Because you acted like one, Dad. You forged my signature. You tried to sell my home without my consent. You planned to take $100,000 from me. I was going to pay you back," he insisted. "Once my investments turned around," the familiar excuse hit me like a slap. How many times had I heard some version of this growing up? How many broken promises had been justified with the same hollow assurance? "Please leave," I said quietly, "or Ray will call the police, and they'll escort you out in handcuffs." "Is that what you want?" For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, the realization that I wasn't backing down. Then his expression hardened. "You've changed," he said accusingly. "Success has made you cold, ungrateful." "No, Dad. I've just finally learned to protect myself from you." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away, his shoulders rigid with anger. Only when his car had disappeared from the garage did I realize I'd been holding my breath. "Are you all right, Ms. Adler?" Ray asked. I nodded, though I felt far from all right. "Thank you for your help. Do you still want to go out? I can call you a taxi if you'd prefer not to drive." The confrontation had left me drained. "No, I think I'll stay in tonight." Back in my apartment, I found my mother had prepared dinner. The domestic normalcy, the smell of roasting chicken, the table set for two, brought tears to my eyes. "He was waiting in the garage," I told her, collapsing onto a kitchen stool. "Ray had to intervene." She put down the oven mitts and came to hug me. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Did he threaten you?" "Not explicitly. He made me feel like I was the one doing something wrong, like I was betraying him by protecting myself." My mother sighed. "That's his specialty, turning the tables so his victims feel guilty. I lived with that manipulation for years." We ate dinner quietly, both lost in our own thoughts. Afterward, as we cleared the dishes, my mother broached a subject I'd been avoiding. "Have you considered pressing criminal charges?" I placed a plate in the dishwasher, buying time. "I don't know if I can do that to him." "Think of it this way," she said carefully. "If he were anyone else, a stranger who forged your signature and tried to sell your home, what would you do?" Put like that, the answer was obvious. I'd press charges. Why should he be exempt from consequences just because he's your father? Because it would destroy him," I admitted. "His reputation, his business connections, everything. And what about what he nearly destroyed for you? This home, your financial security, your peace of mind?" She touched my arm gently. "Consequences aren't punishment, Penelope. They're the natural result of choices. Your father made his choices." Her words stayed with me as I prepared for bed. I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the city I loved, thinking about boundaries and consequences and the painful growth that comes from enforcing both. My phone chimed with a new email. From my father, sent to my work address that I hadn't thought to block. "Penelope, I've tried to reach you like a reasonable person, but you're forcing my hand. If you continue with this restraining order nonsense and refuse to reconsider the sale, I'll have no choice but to make public certain information about the source of your startup funding. Do you really want investors knowing you used money from your trust fund, money I set aside for you, to launch the business you claim was built entirely on your own merit? Think carefully about your next move. Dad." I stared at the screen, a cold fury building inside me. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was blackmail. I forwarded the email to Diane with a short message. "I want to press charges, all of them." Then I blocked his work email too, turned off my phone, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I slept without dreaming. Morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains as I reached for my phone, momentarily forgetting I'd turned it off. The silence felt strange after days of constant alerts and messages. I powered it on and watched as notifications flooded in. 3 voicemails from unknown numbers, likely my father using different phones, and an email from Diane marked urgent. I opened Diane's email first. "Penelope, I've filed the initial paperwork for criminal charges based on the evidence we have. The prosecutor wants to meet with you today if possible. Also, be aware that your father appeared at my office yesterday afternoon, attempting to explain his side. Security escorted him out, but he seems determined to control the narrative. Call me when you can." I dressed quickly and found my mother already awake, working on her laptop at the kitchen counter. "Diane wants me to meet with the prosecutor today," I told her, pouring coffee. She looked up, her expression serious. "Are you ready for that?" "I think so. Dad sent me what amounts to blackmail last night. Threatened to tell people I used trust fund money to start my company." My mother's eyes widened. "But that's not even true. Your father never established a trust fund for you. He talked about it for years but never actually did it. I laughed bitterly. Of course. Another empty promise he's now trying to weaponize. Do you have proof that you funded your startup yourself? Every penny is documented. Bank loans, angel investors, my own savings. Nothing from him. Good. Make sure Diane has those records. I nodded, then hesitated. Mom, do you regret leaving him, even with all the financial uncertainty it created? She set her coffee down and met my gaze directly. Not for a single day. Money comes and goes, but self-respect, once surrendered, is hard to reclaim. You're doing the right thing, Penelope. Her words steadied me as I prepared for the meeting with the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Jenkins who listened intently as I recounted the whole story. The evidence is compelling, she said when I finished. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft, and now witness intimidation and blackmail. These are serious charges, Ms. Adler. I understand. If we proceed, your father could face significant jail time. Are you prepared for that? The question struck me with unexpected force. Despite everything, the image of my father in prison was difficult to contemplate. I don't want revenge, I said carefully. I want protection and accountability. Sarah nodded. That's a healthy perspective. The reality is, first-time offenders with good legal representation rarely serve maximum sentences. But there would likely be some jail time, probation, restitution, and a permanent criminal record. What's the alternative? We could pursue a plea deal, reduce charges in exchange for full admission of guilt, financial restitution, mandatory counseling, and probation. Still a criminal record, but possibly no jail time. I considered this. Would that still protect me? Legally, I mean? Yes. The restraining order would remain in effect, and any violation would result in immediate consequences. Plus, a guilty plea would strengthen your civil case if you decide to sue for damages. I need to think about it, I told her. Of course. But don't take too long. Your father has retained counsel, Lawrence Stern. He's a competent defense attorney known for aggressive tactics. The meeting with Sarah left me with a heavy weight of responsibility. As I walked through the public garden trying to clear my head, my phone rang with Diane's number. Your father's attorney reached out, she said without preamble. They want to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? They're proposing your father will sign a legally binding agreement admitting to the forgery, relinquishing any claim to your property, and staying away from you. In exchange, they want you to drop the criminal charges. So he gets away with it, I said, my voice flat. Not entirely. The agreement would include significant financial penalties. But yes, he would avoid criminal prosecution. I sat on a park bench, watching children feed the ducks in the pond. What do you advise? Legally, the criminal case is strong. But these processes can be draining, emotionally and financially. It might take years to resolve completely. She paused. There's something else. Lawrence Stern implied they have revelations about your past that could emerge during trial. More threats. More manipulation. Let me guess. They're going to claim I've taken money from my father before, so this was just another transaction gone wrong. Something like that. I'm not suggesting you let this intimidate you, but you should be prepared for things to get ugly. They already are, I said quietly. After ending the call, I remained on the bench, contemplating my options. The legal path forward was clear, but the emotional calculus was more complex. What did justice look like in this situation? What would healing look like? I was still sitting there when a familiar figure approached. James, my stepfather. My mother must have called him. Penelope. He greeted me warmly. Elizabeth thought you might need a different perspective. Unlike my father's charismatic intensity, James had a steady, calming presence. A man who chose his words carefully and kept his promises. I'm trying to decide whether to accept a settlement or pursue criminal charges, I explained after we'd exchanged pleasantries. Tell me about the settlement. I outlined the terms Diane had described. James listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. It sounds like you're wrestling with the consequences for your father versus protection for yourself, he observed when I finished. Exactly. Part of me wants him to face real consequences. Another part? I don't know. He's still my father. James nodded. It's not an easy position to be in. May I offer a third perspective? Please. Sometimes the most powerful consequence isn't imposed by the legal system, but by the loss of what matters most. He looked at me directly. Your father values control above all else. Money is just a tool for maintaining that control. By setting firm boundaries and refusing to be manipulated, regardless of whether he goes to jail, you're imposing the consequence that will affect him most deeply. The loss of control over me, I said slowly. Precisely. Whether you pursue criminal charges or accept a settlement with strict protections, what matters most is that you're breaking the cycle of manipulation. How do I make sure the cycle stays broken? By being absolutely clear about your boundaries and unwavering in enforcing them. Your father needs to understand that the rules have changed permanently. I considered his words. So, you think I should accept the settlement? I think you should choose the path that gives you the most peace and the strongest protections, without expecting the legal outcome to heal the relationship. That healing, if it ever happens, will require genuine change on his part, not just legal consequences. As we walked back toward my apartment, I felt clearer about what I needed to do. The question wasn't whether my father deserved punishment. He did. But what resolution would best allow me to move forward with my life? When I arrived home, I called Diane. I want to counter their settlement offer, I said decisively. I'll drop the criminal charges on several conditions. A significant financial penalty paid directly to a gambling addiction organization, a permanent restraining order, a legally binding admission of what he did, and mandatory therapy. If he violates any part of the agreement, the criminal charges are immediately reinstated. That's a strong counter, Diane said approvingly. I'll convey it to Stern. One more thing, I added. I want a face-to-face meeting with my father and both attorneys present. If he wants this deal, he needs to look me in the eye and acknowledge what he did. Are you sure that's wise? It's necessary, I said firmly. For both of us. 2 days later, I sat in a conference room at Diane's law firm, waiting for my father to arrive. The glass table between us seemed like an appropriate symbol. Transparency with a barrier. My mother had offered to come, but I decided this was something I needed to do alone. When my father entered with his attorney, Lawrence Stern, I was struck by how diminished he looked. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a tightness around his eyes and mouth that spoke of sleepless nights. Penelope, he greeted me stiffly. Dad, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. The attorneys handled the preliminaries, reviewing the terms of our proposed settlement. My father remained silent, his eyes fixed on the table. Only when Diane mentioned the financial penalty, $100,000 to be donated to a gambling addiction foundation, did he flinch visibly. Before we proceed, Diane said, my client has requested a direct acknowledgement from Mr. Adler regarding his actions. Stern began to object, but my father raised his hand to stop him. It's fine, Lawrence. That's fair. He looked at me directly for the first time. What do you want me to say, Penny? The truth, I replied simply. I want you to admit what you did and why you did it. He took a deep breath. I forged your signature on a power of attorney document. I attempted to sell your apartment without your knowledge or consent. I planned to use part of the proceeds to pay off gambling debts. The blunt admission hung in the air between us. After years of evasions and excuses, the unvarnished truth felt almost shocking. And the gift card? I prompted, needing him to acknowledge the insult of that gesture. A flush crept up his neck. I offered you a $900 gift card as compensation. It was inadequate and insulting. I see that now. Why? I asked, the question encompassing much more than this specific betrayal. Why do this to me? My father looked down at his hands. I told myself it was a business opportunity you were too inexperienced to appreciate. That I was helping you make a smart financial move. He paused. But the truth is, I was desperate. I owed money to people who don't take IOUs. I convinced myself that the end justified the means. Did you think about what that apartment meant to me? Not just financially, but emotionally? I didn't allow myself to think about that. he admitted. When you're drowning in debt, other people's feelings become abstract. Even the feelings of people you love. The word love caught me off guard. When was the last time we had spoken of love between us? This pattern goes back much further than this incident, I said quietly. You've been putting your needs above mine my entire life. He flinched, but didn't deny it. I've made many mistakes as your father. This was the worst, but not the first. Do you understand that things can never go back to the way they were? That our relationship, if it continues at all, will have to be different? Yes, he said. And for once I believed him. I understand that I've broken your trust in a fundamental way. I don't expect forgiveness, Penelope, but I am sorry. Truly sorry. Something shifted inside me at those words. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of the knot of anger I'd been carrying. I appreciate that. It's a start. We proceeded with the formal aspects of the settlement. My father signed the confession of wrongdoing, agreed to the financial penalty, accepted the permanent restraining order with specific exceptions for possible future supervised contact, and committed to weekly therapy sessions for at least 1 year. As the meeting concluded, Stern guided my father toward the door, but he hesitated. Penelope, there's something else you should know. He reached into his jacket and removed an envelope. This is the original of your mother's grandmother's emerald necklace appraisal. I told her it was lost when I pawned the necklace years ago, but I kept it. The pawn shop in Chicago still has it. With this paperwork, she can reclaim it. Diane accepted the envelope on my behalf. We'll make sure she gets it, she said firmly. After they left, I remained seated, processing what had just occurred. Are you all right? Diane asked. I think so, I said slowly. It wasn't what I expected. What were you expecting? More fight, more denial, more him? Diane smiled gently. Sometimes when people lose everything, they find clarity. I can't say whether your father's remorse is permanent, but it seemed genuine. Yes, I agreed. It did. As I left the office building, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. I felt lighter somehow, as though I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for years. Not just the immediate crisis of the apartment, but the weight of trying to win my father's approval, of making excuses for his behavior, of blaming myself for his failures. Back at my apartment, I walked through each room slowly, reclaiming the space that had almost been taken from me. In the process, I realized something important. While I had successfully protected my property, the greater victory was in protecting myself, my boundaries, my self-respect, my right to make my own choices. My phone chimed with a text from my mother. How did it go? I called her instead of texting back. Better than expected, I told her. He admitted everything, signed the paperwork, and he gave me something for you. The appraisal for Grandma's emerald necklace. He says it's still at a pawn shop in Chicago. Her sharp intake of breath told me how much this meant. After all these years, I never thought I'd see it again. We can go to Chicago next weekend to retrieve it if you want, I offered. I'd like that very much, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Penelope, I'm so proud of you. Standing up to him couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted, but it was necessary, for both of us. After we hung up, I made myself tea and sat on my balcony, watching the city transition from day to night. The lights coming on in windows across the skyline reminded me of stars emerging, each one representing a life, a story, struggles and triumphs I knew nothing about. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. Not because everything was resolved, there would be lingering effects from this betrayal for years to come, but because I had faced a painful truth and survived it. I had set boundaries and enforced them. I had chosen self-protection over the familiar pattern of enabling. My apartment was still mine, but more importantly, so was my life. 1 month after the settlement, life had settled into a new normal. I returned to work full-time, threw myself into a promising new project, and began the process of healing. My mother had reclaimed her grandmother's emerald necklace from the Chicago pawn shop. a small victory that represented something much larger for her. I hadn't heard directly from my father since the meeting at Diane's office, though I knew from James that he was complying with the terms of our agreement. He had paid the full donation to the Gambling Addiction Foundation, was attending therapy twice weekly rather than the required once, and had moved to a smaller apartment in Cambridge to reduce his expenses. These changes sparked complicated feelings in me. Part of me was glad he seemed to be taking responsibility for his actions. Another part remained wary, having seen too many short-lived reform efforts throughout my childhood. On a crisp Saturday morning, I was preparing for a run when my doorbell rang. The security monitor showed a courier with another legal-looking envelope. My stomach tightened. I wasn't sure I could handle more legal complications. The envelope contained a formal letter from Lawrence Stern's office, but it wasn't what I feared. It was notification that my father had voluntarily entered a 3-month residential treatment program for gambling addiction. Attached was a handwritten note. Penelope, I wanted you to hear this from me, though I'm respecting the restraining order by communicating through proper channels. This is not an attempt to win back your trust or reduce my obligations under our agreement. It's simply something I should have done years ago. My therapist believes my gambling was an attempt to fill an emptiness inside me. I'm working to understand that emptiness now. Take care of yourself. Dad. I sat with the letter for a long time, unsure how to feel. There was no request for forgiveness, no attempt to renegotiate our boundaries, just information and what seemed like genuine self-reflection. I tucked the letter away and continued with my day, but my father's words stayed with me. The emptiness he mentioned resonated in an unexpected way. I'd felt something similar at times, a void I'd tried to fill with work, achievement, material success. Was there a connection between his destructive patterns and my more constructive but perhaps equally desperate attempts to prove my worth? These thoughts accompanied me as I jogged along the Charles River, the autumn leaves creating a carpet of red and gold beneath my feet. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I almost missed seeing Thomas Blackwell walking in the opposite direction. He recognized me immediately. Ms. Adler, what a coincidence. I slowed to a stop, catching my breath. Mr. Blackwell, I'm surprised you remember me. It's not every day I'm involved in such a unique situation. He smiled awkwardly. I want you to know I had no idea your father wasn't authorized to sell your property. Our company prides itself on ethical dealings. I believe you, I said, and meant it. My father is very convincing. He nodded. We've implemented new verification procedures since then. Double authentication for all powers of attorney. Direct contact with property owners. He hesitated. I hope the experience hasn't left you with a negative impression of Pinnacle Development. Not at all. You were misled, just as I was. We chatted for a few more minutes about the real estate market and development plans for the area. As we were about to part ways, Blackwell mentioned something that caught my attention. The offer still stands, by the way. Not the original one. That project has been redesigned. But if you ever decide to sell, we'd be interested. The proper way, of course, dealing directly with you. I appreciate that, but I'm not interested in selling. That apartment means more to me now than ever. He smiled. I understand. Some properties are worth more than their market value. As I continued my run, I reflected on his words. The apartment had indeed taken on value beyond its price tag. It represented my independence, my boundaries, my ability to protect what was mine. When I returned home, I found an email from Diane with a final accounting of the legal expenses and a brief update. FYI, your father's attorney informed me that Richard has signed up for a financial management course in addition to his addiction treatment. Thought you might want to know. Another small step in what appeared to be a genuine effort at change. I wasn't ready to let down my guard, but I could acknowledge the possibility that this experience had affected my father as profoundly as it had affected me. That evening, I invited my mother and James over for dinner. As we sat around my dining table, enjoying a meal I'd prepared, I found myself appreciating the simple pleasure of being surrounded by people who respected my boundaries and valued my well-being. I heard from Dad's lawyer today, I mentioned as we finished our meal. He's entered a residential treatment program for his gambling addiction. My mother's expression was carefully neutral. That's good. Long overdue, but good. Do you think he's really changing, or is this just another performance? She considered the question. People can change, Penelope. I've seen it happen. But it usually requires hitting rock bottom first. She reached for James's hand. What matters most is that you keep your boundaries firm regardless of whether he changes or not. Your mother's right, James added. His recovery is his responsibility, not yours. Your responsibility is to yourself. I nodded, feeling the wisdom in their words. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About responsibility and choices. And what have you concluded? My mother asked. That I can choose to hope for his recovery without making myself vulnerable to further harm. That I can acknowledge the damage he's caused without letting it define me. My mother's eyes shone with unshed tears. That's wisdom beyond your years, sweetheart. As they were leaving, my mother paused at the door. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. I've decided to sell my design business. Really? But you love that business. You built it from nothing. I do love it, but I'm ready for something new. She smiled. I'm going to teach interior design at the community college. Less money, but more time to enjoy life, to travel, to spend time with the people I love. That sounds wonderful, Mom. Life is too short to define yourself by what you own or what you earn, she said softly. I learned that the hard way. I'm glad you're learning it now, while you still have so much life ahead of you. After they left, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. My mother's words echoed in my mind, alongside my father's mention of the emptiness he was trying to understand. Both spoke to something essential about what truly matters in life, not property or money or status, but connection, integrity, peace of mind. My apartment was still important to me, still a symbol of what I'd accomplished and what I'd protected. But maybe its greatest value lay in what it had taught me about myself, my strength, my resilience, my capacity to stand firm in the face of manipulation. These revelations didn't erase the hurt or magically repair the damaged relationship with my father, but they did offer a path forward, one step at a time, with clear eyes and firm boundaries. As I turned to go inside, I noticed the $900 gift card my father had given me, still sitting unopened on my bookshelf. I picked it up, considering what to do with it. After a moment's thought, I reached for my laptop and donated the full amount to a scholarship fund for children affected by gambling addiction. It was a small gesture, perhaps symbolic more than substantial, but it felt right. A way of transforming something that had represented disrespect and manipulation into something positive. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in weeks, secure in my home and, more importantly, in myself. 6 months passed, bringing changes both subtle and significant. Winter yielded to spring, the Boston streets transforming from gray slush to tentative green. My life, too, was in transition. Not dramatically, but in quiet, meaningful ways. I'd been promoted at work, taking on leadership of a project developing privacy software for domestic violence survivors. The irony wasn't lost on me, using my technical skills to help people establish boundaries and protect themselves from those who should have loved them. The work felt purposeful in a way my previous projects hadn't. My apartment remained my sanctuary, but I'd made some changes there too. With my mother's design guidance, I'd redecorated the guest room that had felt tainted by my father's betrayal, transforming it into a home office that better served my current needs. Small adjustments, but they helped reclaim the space as fully mine. The legal aftermath had finally settled. My father had completed his 3-month residential treatment program, continued with outpatient therapy, and remained in compliance with all terms of our agreement. Diane kept me updated on these developments without my having to ask, a kindness I appreciated. On a warm Saturday in May, I was sorting through old files when I found a photo I'd forgotten existed, my father and me at my college graduation. His arm was around my shoulders, both of us smiling broadly. I remembered that day clearly, how proud he'd seemed, how I'd believed it marked a turning point in our relationship. I studied his face in the photograph, searching for signs of the manipulation that would follow. There were none visible, just what appeared to be genuine pride and affection. Had it been real, that emotion, or just another performance? Perhaps both could be true simultaneously. My father could feel genuine love for me while still being capable of betrayal when his needs conflicted with mine. Human relationships rarely fit into neat categories of all good or all bad. My phone rang, interrupting these reflections. It was Diane. "Penelope, I've received a formal request from your father's attorney. Richard would like to meet with you in a supervised setting. He's proposing a session with his therapist present, at the therapist's office." My pulse quickened. Did they say why? Part of his recovery program involves making amends where possible. Lawrence emphasized that Richard understands if you decline and will respect your decision either way. I sat with the request for several days, discussing it with my mother, with James, with my own therapist whom I'd been seeing regularly since the incident. Their perspectives helped, but ultimately the decision was mine alone. After careful consideration, I agreed to a meeting with strict parameters. 60 minutes maximum, the therapist and Diane both present, in a neutral location. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was ready to listen. The meeting took place on a Tuesday afternoon at the therapist's office, a serene space with muted colors and comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. My father arrived precisely on time, dressed simply in khakis and a blue button-down shirt. He looked healthier than when I'd last seen him, clearer eyes, steadier hands. "Thank you for coming, Penelope," he said formally, taking the seat across from me. Dr. Winters, a composed woman in her 50s, facilitated the conversation. "Richard has something he'd like to share with you today, if you're willing to hear it." I nodded, maintaining eye contact with my father. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "First, I want to be clear that I'm not asking for anything from you today. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, not even a response. I simply want you to know what I've learned about myself and my behavior toward you." This unexpected humility caught me off guard. The father I knew would have launched into justifications or attempted to re-establish control of the narrative. Through therapy, I've come to understand that my gambling addiction was a symptom of deeper issues. My need for control, my inability to face failure, my tendency to use people rather than connect with them. He spoke carefully, as if reciting words he'd rehearsed, but also deeply felt. "I manipulated you throughout your life, Penelope. I took credit for your successes and blamed you for my failures. I saw you as an extension of myself, rather than as your own person." The blunt assessment of our relationship struck me as painfully accurate. "The apartment incident was the culmination of a lifetime of this behavior," he continued. "When I gave you that ridiculous gift card, part of me knew how insulting it was. But I couldn't admit that to myself because it would have meant facing how badly I'd betrayed you." He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm not asking you to forget what I did, or to trust me again. I've broken that trust too thoroughly and too often. What I am doing is acknowledging the harm I've caused and taking responsibility for it completely. No excuses, no justifications." I remained silent, processing his words. They aligned with his actions over the past months. The treatment program, the therapy, the scrupulous adherence to our legal agreement. But words had always come easily to my father. It was his actions over time that would reveal whether this change was genuine. "There's something else," he said, reaching for a folder beside his chair. "This isn't part of making amends. It's simply something that belongs to you." He handed the folder to Dr. Winters, who passed it to me. Inside was a legal document, the deed to a small property in western Massachusetts. "It's a cabin on 3 acres near the Berkshires," my father explained. "I purchased it years ago as an investment. It's modest, but paid for, no mortgage. I've transferred ownership to you, with no strings attached. Do with it what you wish. Keep it, sell it, donate it. It's yours." "Why?" I asked, my first word since the meeting began. "Because it's the one thing I own that has value and I acquired it legitimately. No gambling money, no schemes, Just hard work from a brief period when I was actually doing things right. He met my gaze steadily. I know it doesn't make up for what I tried to take from you. Nothing could. But I wanted you to have it anyway. I looked to Diane, who nodded slightly, confirming that the transfer was legitimate and uncomplicated. Thank you, I said simply, neither accepting nor rejecting the gesture. The remainder of the session was less intense. My father shared more about his recovery process, his new financial management system, overseen by an accountant with access to all his accounts, and his modest job at a local bookstore. I shared little in return, not yet ready for that level of exchange, but I listened without interruption. As our time drew to a close, Dr. Winters asked if I had any questions for my father. Just one, I said. Are you happy? The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it carefully before answering. I'm not sure happy is the right word. I'm more at peace. For the first time in my life, I'm not running from myself or chasing the next big win. I'm just living one day at a time, trying to be honest. He offered a small smile. It's quieter than my old life. Sometimes it's harder. But yes, in a way I never understood before. I think I am happier. After the meeting, Diane walked me to my car. What are you thinking? She asked gently. I'm thinking that people can change, I replied slowly. But I'm also thinking that one conversation doesn't erase decades of behavior. Very wise, she approved. What will you do about the cabin? I considered this. I'll have it inspected and assessed. Beyond that, I'm not sure yet. The cabin turned out to be exactly as described, a simple 2-bedroom structure on a beautiful wooded lot. After visiting it once, I decided to keep it, not as a connection to my father, but as a retreat for myself, a place of quiet and reflection separate from the city apartment that had been the center of so much conflict. Over the following months, I maintained cautious, limited contact with my father. Brief phone calls on birthdays and holidays. A supervised lunch when he reached 1 year of sobriety. Small steps, each one evaluated carefully. I couldn't say I fully trusted him again, perhaps I never would. But I could acknowledge his efforts to change and maintain boundaries that protected us both. The apartment in Boston remained my primary home, my safe space, my symbol of independence. But it no longer defined me or my sense of security. Through the painful experience of almost losing it, I discovered something more valuable. The knowledge that my worth wasn't tied to what I owned, but to who I was and how I lived. On the anniversary of the day I'd stopped the fraudulent sale, I hosted a small dinner party for the people who had supported me through that crisis. My mother and James, Diane and her husband, a few close friends. As we shared a meal in the home that had almost been taken from me, I realized how much had changed in a year. The apartment was still mine, still important to me, but what filled it now mattered more. Laughter, honest conversation, genuine connections. I had protected my property, yes, but more importantly, I had protected myself and discovered my own strength in the process. Later that evening, as the last guests departed, my mother lingered behind. You seem content, she observed. More grounded than I've ever seen you. I smiled, knowing she was right. I think I finally understand what you meant about self-respect being more valuable than money. It took me half a lifetime to learn that lesson, she said, embracing me. I'm glad you learned it sooner. As I closed the door behind her, I walked through my apartment, appreciating each room not just for its material value, but for what it represented. My journey from vulnerability to strength, from confusion to clarity. The $2 million my father had tried to pocket, and the insulting $900 gift card he'd offered as compensation, were now just details in a larger story. One about recognizing manipulation, setting boundaries, and reclaiming power. My home was mine again, truly mine, not because of legal documents or security systems, but because I had fought for it and for myself. In doing so, I had discovered that the most valuable thing I possessed wasn't this luxury apartment with its impressive skyline views, but the wisdom I'd gained within its walls. Wisdom that would guide me long after these particular rooms ceased to matter. My father had sold many things throughout his life: dreams, promises, trust. He had almost sold my apartment. But in his final, most important lesson to me, he had inadvertently taught me what could never be sold or taken: my sense of self-worth, my courage, and my determination to live with integrity. For that unintended gift, far more valuable than any property, I was, ironically, grateful.